Hokage I'll become stronger when I'm fishing. Chapter 321 to 340. Chapter 321. Sauron of the Nerve. Not good. Zoro was blasted out, and his heart skipped a beat. But at this moment, Yagami Kangdu raised his head and gave the monster a cold look. The domineering arrogance burst out in this look, causing the monster's movements to stop for a moment. Although it barely supported it and did not faint, it staggered back instantly. Seeing this scene, Zoro, who was nervous, was startled. What's the matter? Although I don't know what's going on, the monster suddenly became unsteady, which is obviously a good thing. I guess it was tripped by something. And at this time, because of the collapse of the buildings, Zoro also saw Luffy and his party gathering not far away, fighting a monster. Hey, Luffy! Sauron called out at that direction. Luffy and the others heard the voice and looked over, and saw Zoro. Solemn, and his tone was a little nervous, and said, Luffy, there are too many monsters, we can't deal with them, we have to get out of here as soon as possible. Although Luffy is a stubborn one, he also knows that he can't fight to the death with so many monsters. Answering, he retreated while fighting, and ran in the direction of Zoro with Sanji and the others. And this time, countless navies also flooded the streets and fought with many monsters. Some navies fought with their bare hands against the tyrannical ape monster. Some navy soldiers held swords in their hands and slashed out with one sword, splitting the clock tower in half. Luffy and the others were shocked when they saw it. Hey, what's going on with these navies? Usopp swallowed his saliva and couldn't help asking with a look of horror. A group of people is nothing more than a monster to deal with. This kind of single-handedly can fight a monster, the strength is a bit too exaggerated. They are the elite of the headquarters. When Dusky heard Usopp's words, he couldn't help but say in a deep voice. Although she was suspended, she still knew that the Navy headquarters had dispatched a large number of elites to deploy in Rogue Town. These people were all colonels and even major admirals of the Navy headquarters. The headquarters of the Navy. When Sanji heard this, a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Everyone looked at each other in dismay, and suddenly felt that they shouldn't be standing here. They are pirates. After Luffy defeated Admiral Crick, they have already been offered a bounty of 20 million Bailey by the Navy. I think we should go. Usopp reminded in cold sweat. Sanji on the side glanced at everyone, but gritted his teeth and said, no. Miss Nami is not here, she is still in town. Luffy took a deep breath and said with a serious expression, hey, Zoro, Sanji, Usopp, let's go pick up Nami. Although the island has become a battlefield for monsters and the headquarters of the Navy, Nami is still there. In the small town, he can't just turn his head and leave. The monster rushed over with a roar. Luffy waved his fist, Zoro drew his sword, and Sanji flew up. Three of them rushed over together, and they were about to fight the monster recklessly. Three fell, a shock suddenly erupted from the side. Murloc karate, 3,000 tile fists. Boom, there was only a muffled roar, and half of the monster that could not win even with the strength of Luffy and the others was smashed to pieces, and a huge hole appeared. And beside the monster, there appeared a fat figure as one of the 7 Marshalseas under the king, Hexia Jinping. See this scene. Everyone was shocked. Fighting alone with that monster is no problem, this kind of punch will kill you. The existence of a monster instant kill is simply a monster among monsters. Usopp's face is shocked, and he can't help screaming. Said, hey, who is that guy? He is the king of Chihuahua, and Hexia is very flat. Dusky held Shiyu, his chest heaving slightly. Was also startled by this bloody scene, but calmed down quickly. The king goes down to the 7 seas. Zoro, Sanji and the others looked at each other, and they couldn't help thinking of the 3 great forces of the great shipping route mentioned by Johnny. This guy is the same Chihuahua. Hawkeye. No wonder he is so outrageous. Usopp's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Even Chihuahua has appeared, what the hell is going on? Sanji looked at Jinpei, who continued to attack other monsters, and couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine, and said, "I always feel that we are caught in something serious." Dusky took a deep breath and couldn't help thinking of what Yagami Kingdu said before. To settle accounts with the Golden Lion, could it be said that the Golden Lion will appear here? Think of this. She couldn't help but glance at Yagami Kingdu next to her. No wonder the Navy headquarters will send heavy troops to guard here. No wonder Yagami Kanto will appear here. It turns out that this is the target of the Golden Lion. Don't be stunned, take Nami over first and then talk about it. Zoro remained calm even in this situation, speaking to Luffy and the others in a deep voice. At the same time, he looked at Yagami Kingdu and Dasichi, and said, "There seems to be no safe place here, you better get out of here as soon as possible." Dusky was a little stunned when she heard this, and glanced at Kingdu, the god of the gods. Only then did I realize that the group of people in front of me didn't seem to know Yagami Kingdu. Philo reminds you. 3 things to read, collect, recommend, and share. Chapter 322. The situation is critical, unexpected battles. Nami. Luffy shouted because he didn't know where Nami was. Just after Luffy shouted, "In a ruin not far from here," immediately Nami's response came. "I'm here." Nami got out from behind the ruins, saw Luffy and the others from a distance, looked happy, and immediately he was about to run towards Luffy and the others. She could run halfway. 1. The monster rushed over. Not good. Oops. Nami. Luffy, Zoro and the others changed their expressions in unison, and immediately rushed towards that direction, but it was too late even if they accelerated and dashed at this distance. And just at the critical moment, the sound of a wooden staff suddenly sounded from the ruins. T. Fujitora walked out of the ruins next to him. He raised his head to look at the monster, and opened his eyes with only the whites and no pupils. The stick in his hand was raised. Boom! A gravitational force fell instantly, and the monster immediately fell. The crushed whole body lay on the ground, unable to move. Under the terrifying gravity, the whole earth showed signs of cracking. It's that old man. Luffy, Zoro and others were stunned for a moment, seeing the scene in front of them, immediately. Thinking of the small boat that I encountered at sea many days ago, I couldn't help but look up. That much. Thank you. Nami couldn't help thanking Fujitora in a trembling voice. The news about Fujitora that I learned earlier came to my mind. Front of me is not an ordinary blind man, but a big pirate with a bounty of more than 1 billion. Welcome. Fujitora's attitude was very kind. Seeing that Nami's danger was lifted, Luffy and the others finally breathed a sigh of relief. Usopp wiped the cold sweat on his forehead and couldn't help but say, "So strong, that uncle, who is he?" Dasuke looked at Fujitora with a somewhat difficult expression, and said, "He is the captain of the first team of the Yagami pirates. With a smile, there is a bounty of 1.2 billion Baileys." Speaking of which, she couldn't help but glance at Shen Kingdu. It was found that Yagami Kingdu didn't pay attention to the scene in front of him, but in a certain direction on the side, it seemed that there was something there that attracted his attention. Pirates. 1.2 billion Baileys. Luffy, Zoro and others heard these words, and their hearts were instantly set off by stormy waves. Admiral Crick of the East China Sea, the bounty was only 1.7 million Bailey. Luffy beat Crick, and now there is only a 2 million Bailey bounty. The bounty for this person in front of him is actually 1.2 billion. Is 10 times that of Luffy. What kind of concept? Usopp couldn't help but scream, his face full of disbelief. Dusky looked at Usopp, and was about to say something when a clack suddenly came from the street not far away. Glacier era. I saw ice blocks spread from a distance, and a ruined street was frozen in an instant. Boom! A roar exploded. Chingzi's figure flew out and smashed several dilapidated buildings in a row. Shattered into translucent ice cubes, scattered not far in front of Luffy and the others. These ice cubes quickly converged and condensed into Qingzi's body in an instant. Ah la la, I really didn't expect you to be here. Seeing Qingzi's figure, even Dusky looked surprised. But when she thought that there was a Yagami Kangdu next to her, and that the golden lion might attack here, she was not surprised. Compared to Dusty, Luffy, Zoro and the others next to him saw Qingzi, who had been shattered into ice cubes and recondensed, and frozen a street in an instant, was shaking violently in his heart. That guy, is he capable of something? General Qingzi's ability is ice, and it is the ability of nature. Dusky took a deep breath and responded. Her direct commander, Smog, is also a natural type ability user. Ability is smoke, but smoke and ice are obviously different. Smokey and Qingzi are completely incomparable. General, you said general. Sanji caught Dusky's words and couldn't help turning his head. He's the admiral of the Navy headquarters. Yagami Kangta answered casually, but instead of looking at Sanji and the others, he looked leisurely in the direction in front of Qingzi. There. A man in a green cloak came out. He seemed a little surprised. Originally, I just planned to come to see Luffy, who was about to embark on the Great Route, but I didn't expect that the security of Rog Town suddenly became so strict. It seems to have become a battlefield. The sudden outbreak of battle made it impossible for him to hide anymore. After being exposed, he immediately encountered Qingzi's attack, and in desperation he could only fight back. It was really unexpected. Long looked at Qingzi and said slowly, is this the place where the Golden Lion is going to attack? No wonder there is such a big battle. Compared with the calmness of the dragon, Qingzi's attitude is very solemn. The appearance of the dragon was completely unexpected to him, or that the Navy did not expect at all. Their plan was only to deal with the Golden Lion, but now suddenly there is a dragon. Chapter 323, Peach Rabbit vs. Golden Lion. No matter what, you can't let go of you, the world government's main culprit. Qingzi's eyes changed for a while, but he still spoke slowly. The whole person rushed towards the dragon fiercely, raised his hand and pressed it, and a huge ice ball suddenly fell from the sky. The huge momentum attracted the attention of countless people, and Luffy, Zoro and others even had shocked expressions on their faces. Facing Qingzi's attack, Long snorted coldly. Without fear, he raised his hand and punched it out. The fist collided with the puck. Boom! There was an earth-shattering explosion, and the ice ball was dozens of meters in diameter. Just like that, it was smashed by the dragon's punch and turned into countless pieces of ice. Seeing this scene, the expressions of Luffy and others were already stiff. Who am I, where am I, and what am I doing? That's the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Long. Looking at the figure confronting Qingzi, Dusky's expression changed, and finally she spoke with a shocked expression. The Revolutionary Army has become more and more powerful, and the ideas it spreads have threatened the rule of the world government in many ways. Compared with the four emperors, the dragon is a criminal who is more valued by the government and the navy. Leader of the Revolutionary Army. When Sanji next to him heard the words, his already shocked expression suddenly added to his horror. Much about the forces like the four sovereigns and the seven martial seas, but he knew a lot about the Revolutionary Army. Because in the newspapers of the East China Sea, there are often messages about dragons. Moreover, the forces of the Revolutionary Army in the East China Sea have also grown and grown, and they even overthrew a country not long ago. With shock in Sanji's eyes, he looked at the dragon who was fighting Qingzi, and couldn't help saying, how can such a big man appear here? I think we should go. Usopp spoke weakly, his legs and feet were already starting to weaken at this time. A reminder from Usopp finally made Zoro and others wake up, and together with Luffy, the group immediately planned to evacuate from here. But just when Zoro was about to greet Yagami Kangdu and Tatsuya to retreat, a reckless and arrogant laughter appeared in the sky. Jia ha 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 ha. It's a big enough scene. The Admiral, and the King of the Seven Wuhai, your navy and the world government have done a good job of welcoming them. A golden lion with golden hair fluttered and appeared in the sky. Just put his hands in front of him, suspended in the dark sky, overlooking the entire rogue town. And behind the golden lion, there is a boat slowly floating. There are countless pirates wearing black clothes on it, all of them showing a ferocious expression. Qingzi stopped the movements in his hands, collided with the dragon and backed away from each other. He looked at the sky with a depressed expression, and looked at the golden lion coldly. Originally, the battle set up here was to defeat and arrest the golden lion. But now an unexpected person appeared, the leader of the revolutionary army, Long, and things became chaos. Far as the world government's scavenging priority is concerned, the dragon's priority is undoubtedly above the golden lion. But their primary task this time was not to deal with the dragon, but to deal with the golden lion, which made the situation a big problem. Qingzi, you little bastard, you haven't seen him for 20 years, and you have become an admiral of the navy. The golden lion is floating in the sky overlooking Qingzi, with a cigar in his mouth. He and Garp didn't fight less often. Qingzi was Garp's sidekick. Qingzi stood there, staring at the golden lion coldly, without any sign of weakness. He was really just a sidekick at the time and could only watch Garp fight with the golden lion. But now he is already the highest combat power of the world government, the general of the naval headquarters. In comparison, the golden lion is nothing but an old lion with a broken leg. Right at this time, a woman wearing a navy justice cloak with pink cuffs appeared, holding a sword with a cold light in her hand, looking up at the sky, and said, "The dragon is handed over to you, and the golden lion is up to me to deal with." Navy headquarters. Alternate General Tautu, okay. Qingzi didn't give in either. Although their troops were insufficient, they couldn't let Long run away anyway, at least let him entangle Long. As for whether Tautu could deal with the golden lion, he did not doubt it either. Because Tautu's current strength is not weaker than him, if Tautu can't deal with it, then he can't deal with it either. What's more, Qingzi didn't think that a golden lion who had broken his leg and disappeared for 20 years could still possess the powerful strength that woman. The golden lion glanced at the peach rabbit below, with disdain in his eyes, and said, "Just because you want to deal with Lao Su and kill me with your legs." The golden lion has an impression of Qingzi, but he has no impression of Tautu. Tautu's rank was even lower than Qingzi's back then. As one of the top 3 legendary pirates, he naturally wouldn't have any impression of a brigadier general in the navy. The words of the golden lion annoyed Tautu for a moment. I saw her eyebrows stand upright, and anger flashed in her eyes. Immediately, all anger subsided, and the whole person became Ji Yu Jing Wu Bo. The blade in his hand lifted up and slashed towards the golden lion. Phailu reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 324, Conflict, Monster Peach Rabbit. Shit. A golden sword chi suddenly swayed, traversing the entire sky in an instant. Seems that the gloomy sky is to be split with a single sword. The sword of Tautu instantly attracted Zoro's attention, causing his complexion to change for a while. That woman. This level of slashing is far from what he can wield now, a woman's swordsmanship. Even so fierce. Dusky looked at Peach Rabbit, and couldn't help showing a hint of awe. As a swordsman, she has long been fascinated by Momotu, who is also a swordsman. It's Lieutenant General Tautu, the closest existence to the general. It is said that there is no accident, it is likely to be the next general. Another monster. Sanji and the others felt their scalps go numb for a while, and their hearts were about to go numb. Golden Lion didn't take Tautu in his eyes at first, but Tautu's shocking sword made his complexion change. He snorted lowly, and swung his right leg. Chopping. Om. The same golden sword energy burst out and collided with Tautu's slash. A roar erupted in the sky, and eventually both shattered. When the sword chi was broken, the golden lion's eyes were still full of arrogance and arrogance. That looked at Tautu was no longer as contemptuous and disdainful as before. This woman is very strong. Boom, boom, boom. Peach Rabbit stepped on the moon and charged directly towards the golden lion in the sky. His face was cold, and murderous intent loomed on the edge of his sword. The golden lion didn't speak, but got cold on the Peach Rabbit, and his legs swayed continuously. In the fierce confrontation with Tautu in the sky, in the blink of an eye, he made dozens of moves. 10. Ding ding dong dong. Peach Rabbit's eyes flickered with cold light, and when a sword was swung out, the armed arrogance condensed on the sword's edge. It turned out that the golden lion couldn't stand it, and its body flew back more than 10 meters. You're already so old, you should have found a place to rest earlier. With one blow, the golden lion was repelled. Tautu opened his mouth coldly, and continued to charge with his sword. Obviously, who had broken his legs and disappeared for 20 years, was in pure swordsmanship. Fighting against each other, it's no longer Tautu's opponent. The golden lion's face sank, and he said, when Lao Su is crossing the sea, you don't know where to hide and runny nose. Ding ding dong dong. The two continued to fight and came together. With the flexibility of the fluttering fruit, the golden lion stabilized the situation. Although the Peach Rabbit can walk on the moonwalk is not as flexible as the fluttering fruit. In terms of flexibility, the two fought fiercely together, and it seemed that there was no victory or defeat in a short period of time. At this time, Luffy and his group were ready to retreat. But, almost as they were about to leave, countless black-clad pirates jumped off the ship in the sky. The leading group exudes a violent aura. Hundreds of pirates jumped off the boat. Each with a stern and cold face, he looked at the numerous navies on the island with a grinning smile. Destroy the navy, kill them all. Countless people roared in response and rushed towards the navy on the island. At the same time, a lieutenant general on the navy side also waved his sword and shouted, "They are going to charge. The second team is 22, the third team is 33, and the fourth team. Meet me." Yes. Countless navies responded loudly and quickly formed a queue of nearly 1,000 people. The navy and the pirates set up a charge position like this, with a surging momentum, shouting and killing each other and rushing towards each other. Chapter 325, People are not as good as God. Luffy is stupid. Zoro is stupid. Sanji is stupid. The location they were in, luckily or not, was exactly the center of the charge between the two sides. Ah, it's over. It's dead now. Usopp almost burst out with tears and snot, and he wanted to escape. But one side is the large force of the navy, and the other is the large force of the pirates, completely caught in the middle. When the navy and the pirates under the command of the Golden Lion launched a decisive battle and charge, Yagami Kengdu's gaze couldn't help but withdraw from the Golden Lion and Peach Rabbit in the sky. He glanced at the navy rushing towards the left and the pirates rushing towards the right, and could not help frowning. What's this about? Is my presence so low? Although he didn't show his aura, he didn't hide his figure this time. Standing here, everyone can see it. When Yagami Kengta opened his mouth, Nami, who was in a panic, noticed that at the back of the team, the less conspicuous Yagami Kengta, the whole person, he was stunned for a moment. He's here too. The moment Nami saw Yagami Soto, Nami's heart was a violent shock. What happened a few days ago was imprinted in her mind, but it still lingers. This is the end of the farce. Let's go. When the navy and the pirates were about to charge together, Yagami Kengdu spoke in a cold tone, and walked towards the Golden Lion. Being restrained by the momentum of the navy and pirates, his body is stiff. Who was clenching his teeth and pulling out the words Hidayi, was stunned when he saw Yashin Kang go. Hey, you! At the same time, Luffy, Sanji and others also looked at Yagami Kengta. Of course they couldn't have seen Yagami Kengta and Daisuke. It's just that there are continuous surprises, and there is no time to ask Zoro. Now, seeing Yagami Kengdu suddenly walking forward alone, as if he didn't notice the navy and pirates charging on both sides, he couldn't help but be stunned. Who is that guy? Sanji couldn't help asking Zoro. When Zoro was about to say that he was not very clear, he saw the figure of Yagami Kangdu, and suddenly he flew out of thin air. Just like that, he rose to the sky. Wow, it's flying. That guy. Luffy couldn't help but instantly widen his eyes, and a flash of light flashed in his eyes. It was also at the moment when Yagami Kangdu rose out of thin air. The few lieutenant admirals who were leading the charge of many navies suddenly stopped in their footsteps. Looking at Yagami Kangdu, cold sweat instantly appeared on his forehead, and his eyes were full of horror. That guy is. It's the 4 emperors and 8 gods. Why is he here? Not only a few lieutenant generals, but even the many major generals next to them all showed horror, and some people even showed panic in their eyes. Some of them still have the scene of Yagami Kangdu destroying the naval headquarters in their minds, and they can't get rid of it until now. Iori. At the same time, Qingzi, Taotu, Long, and Golden Lion were 4, and their eyes fell on Yagami Kangdu in an instant, and all of them looked different in an instant. Qingzi was not surprised by the appearance of Yagami Kangdu. Because Yagami Soto obviously got the Golden Lion's next attack plan from Basque, it's normal to appear here. He also communicated with the naval headquarters and made preparations in advance, and Taotu was one of the preparations. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 326. Make a judgment, kill in one move. But I didn't expect that the appearance of the leader of the Revolutionary Army, Long, completely disrupted this step. Even if they have other backers, it is already the limit to deal with the Golden Lion and the Dragon at the same time. Want to deal with Yagami Kangdu, it will be a fantasy. In the sky. The 8 gods Kangdu looked at Taotu and the Golden Lion, and said in a calm tone, I want to take the head of the Golden Lion with my own hands, and you navies should stand on the side. Tone is very gentle, but in an instant, the domineering who belongs to the 4 emperors and holds the title of the strongest in the world is fully revealed. Nonsense. Taotu frowned lightly, snorted coldly, and said, it is the duty of the navy to arrest the Golden Lion, how could you let a pirate intervene? Seems like a good thing for Yagami Kangdu to deal with the Golden Lion, how could their navy give in such a place? In the face of the confrontation between the 2 pirates, the navy did not dare to intervene and stood on the sidelines. Once this kind of news spreads, the navy's prestige and face will be completely wiped out. It's not a request, it's a notification. Yagami Kangdu spoke in a flat tone, and when the words fell, he shouted without looking back, his tone raised a tone. Smile. At wooden staff, Fujitora climbed up into the sky on a stone stake. Block her. Leave it down. Fujitora pulled out a staff sword and opened his pupilless eyes. Looking in the direction of Taotu, his face was calm and calm. Although Taotu knew Fujitora, Yagami Kanto's attitude of throwing her to his subordinates made her annoyed and couldn't help but slashed at Yagami Kanto. But the next moment, Fujitora swung out a knife, blocking Momotu's attack. Your Excellency the Navy, this old man will block you next, so please give me more advice. Captain of the 8 Gods Pirates. Taotu took a deep breath, knowing that it was impossible to deal with Yagami Aoto if Fujitora stopped him. Finally, he turned his eyes to Fujitora, showing a solemn look. Fujitora, she didn't mean to underestimate it. According to the information learned from various information, the strength of this first team captain is likely to be above Shiryu of the Rain. And at this time, Yagami Kangdu's gaze finally turned to the Golden Lion. I didn't expect you to grow to such an extent that even the guy with the white beard was defeated by you. I didn't believe it when I first got the newspaper. The Golden Lion stared at Kangdu of the 8 gods, suddenly stretched out his hand, and said, with your current power and my plan, we can join forces and easily dominate this world. Join hands with me, 8 gods. Although Yagami Kangdu is considered a junior to the Golden Lion, he has become the 4th emperor and defeated the white-bearded Yagami Kangdu, and his status in his eyes has long been different from before. However, just as he finished speaking, Yagami Kingdu had already slashed over with a sword. Bullshit. This sword is wrapped in the violent impact of the 8th door Dunjia, and it bursts out towards the Golden Lion in an instant, smashing the Golden Lion's whole body. Golden Lion didn't expect Yagami Kingdu to suddenly attack, but he still reacted immediately. Legs swayed, and the armed color was domineering, and he slashed out a sword. But the Golden Lion's slash collided with the Yagami Kingdu's Day Tiger, and they just stalemate for half a second, and then collapsed directly. The violent Day Tiger surging past, the Golden Lion slammed the whole person upside down, and flew the hundreds of meters away in an instant. One blow. High judgment. Tautu, who was fighting Fujitora, saw this. In this scene, I couldn't help taking a deep breath, and there was a little vibration in my eyes. This is the strongest strength in the world. The Golden Lion, who was on a par with her fiercely, only took a single blow in front of Yagami Kingdu. The whole person who was bombarded directly flew out, unable to fight head-on. To read the underlined version of the novel, please download Fei Lu's novel. Chapter 327. The Man Who Destroyed the Naval Headquarters. Couldn't help but think of the scene in Dressrosa, when he cooperated with Kizaru Chado to defeat Yagami Kingdu. At that time, the 8 gods Kingdu were far from being as strong as they are now. Even the 8 gods Kingdu might not be able to win her. But now so many years have passed, although her strength has also improved. But Yagami Kingdu soared into the sky and completely left her behind. This is why my efforts are not enough. But I have never neglected the practice of swordsmanship. The other side. To being shocked, Chingzi couldn't help but sigh. The strength of Yagami Kingdu became stronger again. If he fights alone, it will be difficult for him to protect himself, let alone defeat. It seems that it was after Yagami Kingdu escaped from the advanced city, and it completely soared into the sky. The rising trend is no longer unstoppable. The strongest in the world. Long looked at the figure of Yashin Kingdu from afar, and there was a hint of depth in his eyes. Although he is not afraid of Yagami Kingdu, he has to admit it. Today's 8th god Kingdu is stronger than him. If there is a life and death struggle, he's probably the one who dies. He had heard about Yagami Kanto a long time ago, and at that time he even planned to recruit Yagami Kanto and Nina into the Revolutionary Army, but Yagami Kanto refused. I thought that Iori Soto might be defeated by the Navy, but no one thought of it. Not only did Yagami Kingdu fail to be defeated by the Navy, he even sneaked in and brought out Shiryu of Rain and escaped from the prison intact. This rise is unstoppable. Even Chingzi, Tautu and the others are shaking in their hearts for the strength of Badu, not to mention Luffy Zoro and others below. Everyone was shocked. Shichibukai, who kills monsters in one blow, the general of the Navy headquarters, and the Golden Lion Shiki, who is one of the 3 legendary pirates with Roger the Pirate King. One is bigger than the other. The brief confrontation between the Golden Lion and the Peach Rabbit is already a fight between gods in their eyes. But after Yagami Kingdu made his move, he sent the extremely terrifying Golden Lion flying out in one move, leaving their minds almost blank. Who can tell me what happened? That guy, what is? Sluggish expression as he watched Yagami Kingdu blow the Golden Lion away. The 8 gods Kingdu. Dusky stood beside him and answered Soren's question. She looked up at Kingdu, the 8 gods in the sky, with a hint of complexity in her eyes, and said, one of the 4 strongest 44 pirates who rule the Great Route. No, it should be said that he is the strongest one. Pirates. There are 3 in the Chiwahai who died under his hands. One of the former 4 emperors died in his hands, and the naval headquarters was also destroyed by him once. In this world, there is no one who can stop that guy. Dasiki's voice was not loud, but each sentence, like a thunderbolt, exploded in the hearts of Luffy and the others. They still don't know what the 4 emperors are, but they all know Chiwahai. Hokage is one of the 7 martial seas, the world's largest swordsman, and his strength is unquestionable. However, there are actually 3 in Shichibukai who died under Yagami Kingdu. There is no doubt that the naval headquarters is The naval headquarters, and it should be the most heavily guarded place in the entire world. That kind of place has also been destroyed by this man. Philo reminds you. 3 things to read, collect, recommend, and share. Chapter 328. The Golden Lion That Blocks Everything, Shike. That guy's bounty. How much? Nami received the least impact, and she looked at Dusky numbly. And he couldn't hold back and asked a question that he had always wanted to ask. Dusky glanced at Nami and said slowly, 5 billion. No extra words are needed. It takes us this simple number, and it even exceeds all the previous descriptions, and all the people present are blank in an instant. Bounty. 5 billion. Bailey, how is it possible? The Golden Lion, which flew upside down several hundred meters away, finally stabilized its figure. But at this moment, his eyes widened, and his eyes were full of disbelief. Although he left his legs in the Push City, he still had absolute confidence in his own strength. Even if it's not as good as Whitebeard, it shouldn't be too bad. But now, from Yagami Kingdo just now made him feel so heavy. The Golden Lion had an incredible look on his face. Unbelievable, he swayed his legs and let out a low voice. Will swordsmanship. Fully exerted, the domineering of the armed color was also stimulated to the limit by him. Lion, Thousand Cut Valley. Countless golden sword chi interwoven into a dense net of swords, slicing towards Iori Kingdo. This blow almost seriously injured Iori Kingdo on the spot. However, today's 8 gods Kingdo, and the overwhelming golden sword energy, have a calm expression. The right hand holds the sword and points diagonally to the foot, and the left hand makes a fist. Boom! The furious day tiger exploded in the void. The golden sword energy that fills the sky is like a gust of wind. Like destroying the rotten tree and pulling the rotten, shattered one after another, and was defeated by the 8 gods Kingdo. Too weak. Seeing the Golden Lion's sword energy being crushed by his own blow, Yagami Kingdo didn't feel any pleasure in his heart, instead he sighed and murmured. Since defeating Whitebeard, Yagami Kanto has no object to measure his own strength. To know. After defeating Whitebeard, he did not stop practicing. Although he has reached his current level, continuing to improve has become very slow, but it has always maintained a process of improving little by little. He doesn't even know how powerful he is now. Impossible. It's impossible. The Golden Lion was crushed by Yashin Kingdo's fluffy punch, and his eyes were widened like he was defeated. Even when facing Whitebeard back then, it wasn't like this. Nothing is impossible, you don't know who you are facing. Yagami Kingdo looked at the Golden Lion from a distance and spoke in a calm tone. The whole person took a step forward, and the space was instantly shortened. He took a step down, and he came to the front of the Golden Lion, and punched the Golden Lion. Boom! The Golden Lion tried his best to resist, but the whole person was still slammed and flew upside down. Like a golden hare, it crossed an arc in the air and quickly fell into the distant sky. Yagami Kingdo didn't stop. After punching the Golden Lion, he lifted his foot and stomped in the air. Stepping out a ripple in the air, the whole person rushed out. He quickly chased after him, and disappeared into the sky in an instant. Until Yagami Kingdo disappeared. And the others withdraw their attention to Yagami Kingdo. There was only one thought in their hearts: the Golden Lion was probably less fortunate this time. Chapter 329. Iron Fist Carp, a child with one punch. Destroy the pirates. A lieutenant general of the Navy headquarters reacted quickly after Yagami Soto and Golden Lion disappeared. He waved his long sword and shouted at the numerous Navy. Although the morale of the Navy was curbed by Yagami Kingdo, it was still better than those under the Golden Lion. Pirates. At this moment, hearing the lieutenant general's order, they suppressed the shock in their hearts, and raised their swords, guns, and artillery with roars. Luffy and the others finally woke up. Only then did they realize that they were still in the center of the battlefield, and the situation had not changed at all. But just when Zoro and the others were sweating coldly on their foreheads and their faces were ugly. Not far away, the dragon, who was fighting with Qingzi, suddenly blinked his eyes and sent his right hand forward. A strange force swayed, and the gloomy sky turned into a gust of wind in an instant. A strong wind swept across the entire rogue town in an instant, blowing towards the navy. "Are you going to help the pirates?" Seeing this, Qingji gave a sharp shout and immediately stepped forward to try to stop it. But although he blocked the dragon, he couldn't stop the gust of wind roaring across the battlefield. The whistling wind blew countless navies to and fro, making it difficult to stabilize their bodies, and even Luffy and the others were staggered. "Good chance. Let's go." Sanji took a few steps backwards in the gust of wind, a look of joy appeared on his face, and he hurriedly shouted at Luffy, Zoro and the others. However, although the navy side was blown away by the strong wind, it was only blown away. The two sides of the sea, who were almost fighting together, still did not reveal too much space to allow them to escape. And at this time, Admiral with a dog's headgear, whose face cannot be seen clearly. He suddenly rushed out of the navy's camp and attacked the many pirates under the command of the Golden Lion. I saw that his fist was instantly attached to the dark-armed color domineering, and when the punch fell, it shook the entire rogue town like an earthquake. The ground directly in front of it shattered, and countless pirates flew upside down. "Look what you all did in the East China Sea." The lieutenant general wearing a dog's headgear roared and entered the pirate camp just like that. One punch, no one can resist him with one half move, and the pirates will be defeated in an instant. The whistling of the wind and the outbreak of the lieutenant general wearing a hood finally completely opened a huge gap in the battlefield. Great! Sanji and the others were shocked when they saw this. But at this time, Luffy looked at that. The figure wearing the dog's headgear was a little dazed. "Come on, Luffy, what are you doing?" Sanji saw that Luffy was in a daze. He grabbed Luffy and ran away. Luffy was dragged away by Sanji, but he still looked at that Vice Admiral, and said, "That guy is a little familiar." "How can you possibly have any familiarity with the Navy? Hurry up and leave." Sanji ignored Luffy's nonsense and dragged Luffy out. Together with Sauron and others, they ran all the way, and finally took this opportunity to escape from the gap. Dusky did not escape with Luffy and the others, but stood in place like a wooden sculpture. Until a cloud of smoke swept across the battlefield and drank at her. "Dusky, what are you doing?" "Ah, Mr. Smaug." Dusky woke up and looked at Smoker, who was covered in smoke. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 330, The Great Pirates of the Old Era Desperate. Smaug was holding 2 cigars and said, "Why did you let those guys slip under your nose? They are the Straw Hat Pirates of the East China Sea." "Ah." Dusky was completely dumbfounded. Spending a long time with Luffy and the others, she didn't find anything similar to the pirates in Luffy and the others. As a result, that group of people turned out to be the Straw Hat Pirates. Smaug looked at Dusky, annoyed and speechless. "Past, it was okay for Dusky to stay a little bit naturally, I thought it would slowly get better. In the end, why did this woman become more and more stunned, or all women like this?" Skyrim. Below the white cloud, a sword energy pierced the cloud, dividing the white cloud into 2. Turned into a ripple and swept through the void, as if to cut everything in 2. Right in front of the sword energy, Yagami Kangdu was suspended in the sky. Facing this terrifying sword energy, his expression did not change, he just raised his hand and waved. Om! The day tiger erupted like a shock, turning the entire air in front of it into a swamp-like vortex. The sword energy hit the surface of the vortex, immediately. It was sucked into it and shattered with a screeching sound. No need to struggle, Golden Lion, the remnants of the previous era, it's long overdue to withdraw from the stage of the sea. If you find a place to retire with peace of mind, I may not be able to find you. Yagami Kanto's understated blow, after smashing the sword of the Golden Lion. Aiming at the indifferent opening of the Golden Lion, he slashed out with a backhand sword. Sigh. The blade cuts through the space. In the blink of an eye, he crossed a distance of dozens of meters, and the blade was aimed at the head of the golden lion. The golden lion's expression changed, and he caught the attack when he saw it. Immediately, swinging his right leg, he brought the named sword withered wood, and met the blade of Yagami Kingdo that fell. Clang! The two swords collided, sparks flying. The golden lion is pure swordsmanship. Domineering, and Yagami Kingdo is the combination of day and tiger domineering. A long time ago, the 8 gods Kingdo suppressed his cultivation and did not exert his full strength. The golden lion thought that the two were evenly matched. I saw a buzzing sound in the space above the golden lion's head, as if some invisible bomb exploded there. The golden lion couldn't bear the power, and the dead wood with the famous sword that was embedded in his leg and connected to the bones made a clattering sound, almost breaking off his leg. The golden lion flew upside down several hundred meters away in the blink of an eye. The severe pain in his leg made his forehead covered in cold sweat. With a streak of blood in his eyes, he gritted his teeth and looked at Yagami Kingdo. Damn. If it was 20 years in the morning, how could this kid have the capital to be so arrogant in front of him? The golden lion is full of anger and unwillingness. This is not unwillingness to strength, but to aging. A roar of unwillingness against the tide of the backward times. I'm golden lion Shiki. There were bloodshot eyes in the golden lion's eyes, looking at the 8 god Kingdo from a distance. The roots of the teeth gnawed bleeding, and the tone showed the spirit of one of the 3 great legends of that era. That era didn't kill me, and the advanced city didn't lock me up. It's not that easy for you kid to take my head. At this moment, the golden lion seems to have returned to its peak period. With his back to the morning sun, his long golden hair spread out like a lion. The whole person exuded a demon-like aura, and he suddenly reached out and grabbed his right leg. Chapter 331, When Everything is Calm. Kacha, the dead wood of the famous sword, which had been connected to the bones that had been healed for 20 years, was torn out of his leg by him. The hilt of the sword was dripping with blood, and there were even finer bones congealed with it. Yagami Kingdo watched this scene and did not respond. Instead, he placed the blade in front of him, and his eyes showed calm and equanimity. Compared with the white beard, the golden lion is a swordsman and a swordsman. This kind of thing doesn't decline much with age. At this moment, who held his sword again after 20 years was equivalent to regaining his identity as a great swordsman standing at the top of the sea. This is the final battle against Yagami Kanto. But the golden lion and the white beard at their peak, and today's Yagami Kingdo are not afraid. A golden lion in his later years, no matter how desperate situations erupt, he can surpass the peak without a sound. The blood of the golden lion's right leg continued to spill from the fracture. But the golden lion didn't take a look at his legs, he just held the dead wood that was dripping with blood. Erected the dead wood and placed it in front of him, a line between his eyebrows. Losing to Roger, the fury of hearing Roger's execution by the Navy, the fury of being imprisoned in the infinite hell of Advanced City. Everything is intertwined. The golden lion raised his head. Cut. 1. The pinnacle of Kendo, the realm of great swordsmen. One sword is equivalent to countless swords, which can cut through countless cannonballs in the sky. Countless swords can also be attributed to one sword, and one sword will cut the boat and split the island. This is the ultimate sword of the golden lion. Not to defeat Yagami Soto, but as a legend from a previous era. The last honor he wants to protect is the dignity of the king who was once the king of this sea. There is no earth-shattering sword energy, some are just a touch of insignificant golden light. All power is concentrated on this point. Chong. Of the golden lion, Yagami Kingdo, who predicted the future with a domineering sense of sight, predicted this scene in advance, and put Murasama into the scabbard. If that's the case, then I'll take you seriously. The 5 fingers of his right hand folded together and clenched into a fist. Who had not used their full strength for a long time, all poured out and circled around his fists. The rich day tiger seems to make the void around his fist burst into a scene, as if it has turned into darkness, and even the light is bent here. Ultimately, Yagami Kanto threw out his fist. Silently, this punch seemed to disperse the sound, and no sound was heard here. Punch also seemed to disperse the light, causing the area to suddenly plunge into darkness. Right in front of Yagami Kangdu, the area with a diameter of nearly 100 meters completely turned into a black silent silence. The day tigers intertwined wildly there, shattering everything. Boom! This is not a roar, but a muffled sound. The muffled sound of a firecracker being pressed under a bowl and exploding. The black area shattered, and a burst of brilliance shot straight into the sky. Instant, a white cloud above the golden lion's head was smashed away, and finally disappeared into the endless sky. The golden lion stands in the sky. The sword in his right hand was slowly lowered, and he just stared at Yagami Kangdu. After a few seconds, "You won." He spat out the last sentence, and the whole person lost his strength. The famous sword in his hand fell off, and the whole person fell towards the sea below. Yagami Kangdu quietly watched the golden lion falling to the sea. An inexplicable feeling arises spontaneously. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 332, Success, the Incarnation of the 3 Puppets. He didn't know what it was like. Maybe Whitebeard had this feeling before, but it was probably not as strong as he was at this time. Without any enthusiasm and blood, even if the golden lion took out the last trick to defend his dignity. Took hold of the sword again, and released a blow with all his strength, but he no longer felt the same feeling he had in previous battles. This is a change of mind. Because the standing position is different. He has become the man at the top of the stairs. Looking at other people, even including the golden lion, is already a completely different look and mentality from before. This is the strongest. Standing at the top of the world. Half a month later. Cake Island's central experimental base. This is the top secret area at the core of the base. Except for Gels, Caesar, Nina, and several others, even if the others are captains, they must obtain the consent of Yagami Kanto before coming here, otherwise they are prohibited from entering. Completed, the 3rd combat power. In the slightly empty hall, Yagami Kangdu looked at a figure in front of him and nodded slightly. That figure had a head. A golden lion, with his head half bowed. The left hand and the right hand are holding a sword, respectively, Withered Wood and Sakura Ten. Their identities are self-evident. The golden lion, Shiki. Yagami Kangdu did not kill the golden lion after defeating it. Instead, he was brought back to the half-dead and used the technology of other gods and Caesar to transform and strengthen his body. The golden lion in the original state of aging, after the enhancement of Caesar's technology and the stimulation of Gore's healing fruit, the body cells recovered to a certain extent. And by Jeers's modification operation, his legs were reinstalled. It took half a month in total. Then came the implantation of Hormes, which is now completely complete. Golden Lion Shiki, no, now it should be called the 2nd largest puppet combat force under Yagami Kangdu, the Mad Lion puppet. Today's Yashin Kangdu can directly control 3 major combat powers. They are Hurricane Incarnation, Katakuri with the title of Sticky Rice, and Shiki, the Golden Lion with the title of Mad Lion. Among them, Hurricane Avatar's combat power ranks first, and it can completely rival the combat power of the Admiral. And if it is played for 10 days and 10 nights, it must be the winner in the end. Because it does not exist in the body, the energy is almost inexhaustible. Apart from the incarnation of the hurricane, the golden lion puppet of the wild lion came in second. The sole incarnation of Yagami Soto, although he can't display his top-level swordsmanship, but can also play a part according to the memory of the body itself. Coupled with the domineering power of the golden lion itself, the recovery after the transformation of Jeers and Caesar, and the power of the fluttering fruit, its combat effectiveness is even higher than that of glutinous rice Katakuri. The 3rd place is Katakuri with Sticky Rice. can say. These three fighting powers are completely equivalent to the puppets controlled by Yagami Kangdu. Is not a separate individual, it can be regarded as the gun in the hands of Yagami Kangdu, the sword in the hands of Yagami Kangdu. There is no doubt that with the existence of these three combat powers now, Yagami Kangdu has already reached the level of 4 emperor pirates with the strength of one person. If this information leaks out, the world government will definitely spare no expense. Duel with Yagami Kangdu and eradicate Yagami Kangdu. But unfortunately, very few people know the secret here. Even Hyerding and other captains didn't know the existence of the puppet incarnation. Chapter 333, Blackbeard is in action. Gales stood beside Yagami Kanto, looking at the golden lion puppet who opened his eyes and called Yagami Kanto the boss. His eyes flickered and he said, "The power we have now will not be vain even if we fight against the Navy headquarters." Almost. Yagami Kanto thought for a while. After calculating the combat strength of Garp, Warring States, the 3 generals, the 2 alternate generals, and the former General Black Arm Zephyr, there is indeed not much difference. After a simple calculation, Yagami Kangdu shook his head slightly and said, "But if you include the world government, the fighting power is not enough." Gertz bowed his head in thought. The hidden power of the world government will always let people see only the tip of the iceberg. Even the current power of the 8 gods pirates has not made much progress in all kinds of intelligence about the world government. The only thing I have learned is that, the general of the army, Gangji Yukong, still has the tyrannical combat power that rivals the admiral of the navy. In addition, the new general of Zero, and the General Hideo, who is in the same era as Cyborg Kong, both have extremely high combat effectiveness. Whoosh! Yagami Kangdu controlled the golden lion who was a mad lion puppet, launched an attack on himself, and simply shook a few moves in the hall of this underground base. After roughly judging the strength of this puppet incarnation, Yagami Kangdu stopped. As he expected, it was slightly stronger than Katakori's puppet incarnation. However, compared with the Admiral in his peak state, it should still be a little bit worse. After all, it is not a golden lion at its peak, but just a puppet incarnation. It would not be difficult to hold down a naval admiral for a short time. Almost. It's time to start preparing my plan. Yagami Kangdu looked at the puppet body in front of him and took a deep breath. Once Blackbeard defeats Ace and hands Fire Fist Ace to the Navy, then the top war is inevitable. During this period, the world government will enter a period of martial law. In a short period of time, it will only defend, and will not take the initiative to attack. When Ace was captured and when the war broke out at the top was also what Yagami Kangdu had already planned. The time to destroy the beast pirates in one fell swoop. There are so many rulers in the new world, they have already some are too long. 444 4 emperors. It's time to reduce one more. After leaving the core base, Yagami Kangdu returned to Sky Island Bika, and Nina was still here to review some more important information. After sorting them out one by one, report them to Yagami Kangdu. The Straw Hats killed a Shichibukai. Yagami Kanto took over the newspaper in Nina's hand and looked at the report on it thoughtfully. Although Sand Crocodile no longer exists, and Luffy and his gang are taking another route, there is still a Chihuahai on that route. In the end, he fought with Luffy and his group, and was completely overturned by Luffy. And after this battle, Luffy's bounty has jumped to 100 million Bailey. The bounties for Zoro and Sanji also reached 30 million Bailey and 28 million 2 Bailey respectively. After all, it has the bloodline of the hero Garp and the leader of the Revolutionary Army. Nina spoke from the side, and now she has a clear understanding of Luffy's origins. Garp's grandson, the son of the dragon, the straw hat on his head also came from Roger, the Pirate King, and later transferred to the hand of the red-haired Shanks. This piece of information is intertwined, it can be said to be incredible. Looks like Blackbeard is about to start. Yagami Kangdu picked up an apple, took a bite, and put down the newspaper. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 334. Baebaihai, Empty Island. After Blackbeard defected, the first period of his journey was to recruit partners, and he had no specific plans during this time. And when Luffy defeated a Chiwahai and made a gap in the Chiwahai, he immediately. There is a plan. That is to become Chiwahai first, in order to seek development. Blackbeard. Nina took the newspaper from the coffee table and thought about it. Recently, the intelligence unit has been watching him, but he hasn't made much movement. Iori Kangdu said. Continue to stare at him. Okay. Nina responded. 10,000 meters above sea level. White sea. This is an empty island. The Golden Melee rode on the upwelling current and finally broke through the cumulus emperor cloud and rushed all the way to the Bye-Bye Sea above the altitude of 10,000 meters. Nami walked to the side of the boat and looked down, but did not see the water. What I saw was just a white cloud, a sea of clouds like seawater. Clouds, why can ships be on clouds? There was a hint of shock in her eyes, and she was very puzzled by this phenomenon. Luffy and the others were a little short of breath at the moment, because it was the first time they came to Baebaihai at a height of 10,000 meters. However, their physiques are special, and they quickly get used to it. Record the pointer, pointing ahead. Nami looked at the direction pointed by the recording pointer, thinking. Randomly instructed Sanji and others to set sail and turn the rudder, towards the direction of the recording pointer. After sailing for about half a day, an island finally appeared ahead. It presents a milk-like scene like the Kingdom of Heaven. Look there. It's an empty island. When Luffy and the others saw the island in the distance, they finally screamed in surprise. There was a look of excitement on everyone's faces. A place like the empty island is like a scene in a dream, but now it is real, and they have arrived. And just when Luffy and the others finally arrived at the empty island. On Angel Island, in a watchtower somewhere, a strange toy saw the Golden Melee coming from a distance and jumped up. Report, intruder. Toys immediately. Report to a sky captain outside the watchtower. Immediately afterwards, the captain of the Sky Island urgently searched for the priest, and reported the news of outsiders on Angel Beach to the priest of Angel Island. The priest was also surprised when he found out, and immediately. Go to the central palace. Intruder. The sugar man was sitting on a chair with white clouds, holding a pile of candy and grapes. Put one grape in his mouth, and glanced at the priest who walked in. Was conquered by Yagami Kangdu a long time ago and became the territory of Yagami pirates, and this Angel Island is of course one of them. Sugar came to Angel Island for vacation before, and found that she liked the scenery here, so she simply stayed here and didn't leave. Yagami Kangdu didn't care much and let her stay on Angel Island. It looks like someone from Qinghai. If we came from the top of the western sky, we should have gotten the information long ago. But we haven't received any information on our side, and it may have come here by that upwelling current. The priest said to the sugar. Sugar's status is special. In terms of status, it is equivalent to Gonfuer, and he can contact Yagami Kangdu at any time. He is usually responsible for managing the toys, while Gonfuer is responsible for the governance of the entire Sky Island, and the two usually have no conflict. When an intruder appeared on Angel Island, it was natural to report it to Sugar first. Chapter 335. The Man Who Claims to be God. The trouble is dead. Sugar ate another grape and said, grab them all. Ah! The priest was stunned. Sugar ate the grapes one by one, and said, isn't the matter on Apolado annoying enough? Don't bother me with this kind of thing. Okay. The priest reluctantly quit. Just after the priest left, a figure in the hall said to the sugar, I said, this kind of thing should be reported to the top. That figure is the giant Rhodes, responsible for guarding the safety of Sugar. Does it matter? Sugar poked 555 grapes with 5 fingers, and then put the fingers into his mouth one by one, saying, anyway. It becomes a toy, and no one will remember them. Giant Rhodes was speechless for a while, but he honestly chose to report to the top. Although he is responsible for protecting the sugar, he is also responsible for watching over it. Can't let sugar dry out something too capricious or exaggerated. In the sky far away from Angel Island, spanning nearly half of the Great Route. This is right above the Cake Island, and also where the Sky Island Bika is located. The Straw Hats have arrived at Angel Island. Yagami Soto, who had just woken up for breakfast, heard Nina's report next to him. He couldn't help shaking his head slightly in his heart. Luffy still couldn't avoid the empty island. But it is also true that the magnetism of Angel Island is too strong. As long as it is there, the direction of the recording pointer will definitely be pulled to the sky. Generally, as long as you stay away from that sea area, the record pointer will repoint to other islands. But with Luffy's character, it is not surprising to encounter an empty island. Yes. Nina Yu held her chin in her hand, pursed her lips and said with a chuckle, Sugar is going to grab them all and turn them into toys. Tisk, that would be interesting. Yagami Kangdu clicked his tongue, but he didn't mean to blame the sugar. Protecting shortness is one of his characteristics, it's just self-willed, I'm covering it up. Nina tilted her head and said, but I stopped it, and the Straw Hats finally dealt with a Chiwahai. Just relying on those priests may not be able to win. If you let the giant roads do it, and then put the sugar in danger, it will not be worth the loss. Once the sugar is unconscious, the toys will all turn back into human beings, so the fun will be great. By sugar were pirates who broke into the territory of Yagami Kanto, or tried to challenge Yagami Kanto. Once it's turned back into human form, it's bound to be a mess. Although the threat is not very big, it will always cause a lot of trouble. Well, let her not fool around. Yagami Kangdu nodded. Luffy's group, whether it is strong or weak, is not weak. It's hard for you to say whether he will suddenly have a small cosmic explosion, and suddenly open the second, and third gears in the Sky Island. After Nina finished talking about Luffy, she suddenly looked straight and said, by the way, in addition to Luffy, there is still a problem on Angel Island. Oh. Yagami Kanto eats a piece of cake. Nina showed a brooding look, and said, the Holy Land Apayado. That is, was washed to the upper half of Gaia Island on the empty island. Recently, a guy who claimed to be a god appeared, and the priest over there went to the island. After a crusade, the whole army was wiped out. Proclaimed God. Strange look on Yagami Kangdu's face, shouldn't this be Enelu? He had found Enelu before, but he has not paid attention to it since then. Where did Enelu have the ability to invade the Holy Land of Apayado, and wipe out the entire army of the expedition team led by the priest? Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend, and share. Chapter 336. Bumper, Straw Hat Pirates. What about more specific information? Yagami Kanto asked Nina. Nina pondered. Because the previous crusade was wiped out, only very little information was passed on. That guy who claims to be a god seems to have the ability to manipulate the earth. Quote. 3 question marks popped out of Yagami Kangdu's head. Isn't Enelu a thunder fruit ability? In the end, he has become a devil fruit ability person who controls the earth. If that guy is really Enelu, then I have to say that this guy is very lucky. Stone fruit or soil fruit? Yagami Kanto couldn't help asking Nina. The former is the ability of Pika under Doflamingo, a rock assimilation who manipulates rocks. The latter is one of the abilities of the natural system, belonging to the upper fruit of the stone fruit. The stone fruit can only assimilate the nearby earth, soil, etc. and cannot actively create rocks and soil. Once it reaches the sea, it has no effect. The soil fruit is the ability of the natural system, and has the ability to directly create rocks and soil. The gap between the two is still huge. I don't know. Nina shook her head and said, there is too little information to judge. The 8 gods Kangdu said, forget it, I'll go and see what's going on. If it is really the ability of the soil fruit, then it will be able to incarnate multiple powerful puppets. Angel Island of Luffy's group did not cause any trouble in the end. Because the Sky Island is completely under the rule of the 8 gods, the appearance of a few Qinghai people is not a big deal at all, and the Sky Island people are used to it. Since not everyone in the 8 gods pirates can set foot on the Sky Island, the least one who can set foot on the Sky Island must be at the first level of the sub-commander, and their status is relatively high. Therefore, Luffy and others in Angel Island were also warmly received by the people of Sky Island. Amazing. There are toys at work. Luffy saw a group of toys holding various tools, busy rebuilding a building, and couldn't help but starlight in his eyes. Zoro put a hand on his chin, showing hesitation, and said, "According to common sense, toys should not work." Do you think there is any common sense here? The empty island itself is incredible. Nami's mouth twitched slightly. Sanji thoughtfully said, "Indeed, the empty island itself is incredible, maybe this is the legendary heaven. There is also a beautiful lady over there." Bang! Nami slapped Sanji's head back with a slap. She looked at a recording she had bought and said, "It should be a kind of special tool. After all, even these have various uses." No. Following Luffy's group, a member of the Sky Island Beret team, heard the words of Sanji and the others, and suddenly said, "Toys and shells are completely different things." Ah! When Luffy and the others heard the words, they turned their heads and looked over. The member of the White Beret team said, "Those toys were all human before, and it was the ability of Lord Sugar that turned them into toys." Hearing his words, Luffy and the others were stunned for a moment, and Sanji also frowned and said, "Why did you turn them into toys when they were humans before? It's not a joke." Chapter 337, Half of Gaia Island, the land on the empty island. The members of the White Beret team said sternly, "There are regulations in the Sky Island law. The punishment for crimes above the 3rd degree is to take away the human body, let them work as toys, and pay for their sins." Hearing this sentence, Sanji was immediately taken aback, glanced at the toy in the distance, and said, "In other words, they were all vicious criminals before, so there is no problem with turning them into toys." The team member nodded and said, "Well, after turning into a toy, you cannot harm humans, and you must obey the orders and reconciliations of the Beret troops and superiors." So it is. Sauron and the others nodded slightly when they heard the words. The existence of the empty island itself is very special. There is such a special punishment system, naturally it is nothing. Being able to turn criminals into toys to work and pay for their sins is much better than being locked in a cage. However, after being reminded by the Beret troops, the eyes of everyone looking at those toys are no longer as strange and amazed as before. Speaking of which, I seem to have seen a lot of toys along the way. Is the crime rate in your empty island so high? Walking, and suddenly asked suspiciously. In their opinion, the atmosphere of this empty island can be said to be peaceful and cannot be more peaceful. Even if there is a crime or something, it is probably rare. The members of the White Beret team shook their heads and said, "Those. Only a small part of the toys are criminals from the empty island, and the more part, I heard, are some pirates in the Qinghai Sea who do all kinds of evil." Poof! This sentence made Sanji almost spit out a mouthful of water. The pirates in the Qinghai Sea. Aren't they the pirates in the Qinghai Sea? And at this moment, Luffy suddenly said innocently, "Ah, we are. The pirates in the Qinghai Sea." The air was suddenly silent. Alas! The members of the White Beret team froze for a moment. Boom, 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 boom. Almost at the next moment, Nami, Zoro, Sanji, Usopp and the others waved their fists in unison. Knocked Luffy to the ground in an instant and beat him violently. He just said that we are adventurers on the Qinghai Sea." While beating Luffy, Nami explained to the members of the Beret unit. The team member looked at Nami and the others strangely. Sanji kicked Luffy a few times, with a trace of cold sweat on his forehead. Immediately, after a ha-ha, he changed the subject and said, "Well, do you have any more worthwhile sights here?" Well, since you are from Qinghai, you probably don't know many things, so I'll take you on a tour. The members of the White Beret team laughed. At this time, Zoro and the others finally stopped moving. The beaten-up Luffy stretched out a hand, barely propped up his body, opened his mouth, and said, "Those toys." Bang! Nami punched Luffy, who had just propped up half of his body, to the ground again. After the farce, the members of the White Beret team took Luffy and others to visit the scenery and food of Angel Island all the way. After a long walk, I finally came to the coast of Angel Island. This is not the place where Luffy and the others stopped the boat, but the coast on the opposite side. Looking from a distance, you can just see the Holy Land of Appayado on the opposite side. As there, land. Seeing Appayado in the distance, or half of Gaia Island, Sanji and the others were all taken aback, but they didn't expect that there would be land on the empty island. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 338, Control the Earth, the Real God. There. The members of the Beret team looked at the Holy Land of Appayado in the distance, with a look of embarrassment on their faces. Sanji noticed his expression and couldn't help but turn his head and ask, "What's the matter?" "Well, it's like this, the soil you can see everywhere in Qinghai is a very precious thing here. And Appayado is a holy place that God gave us 400 years ago, and it has been guarded by us to this day." Speaking of this, the team member's face showed an unspeakable look, and said, "But just a few days ago, someone invaded the Holy Land and occupied it, claiming to be a god, saying that the Holy Land is a place that he is qualified to master. There is such a thing." Zoro and the others also turned around. The members of the Beret team squeezed their fists and said, "Yesterday, the priest led the crusade there, but in the end, the entire army was wiped out." Speaking of this, he showed a look of unwillingness and grief, and gritted his teeth. "However, we will snatch the Holy Land back sooner or later." Hearing his words, Luffy and the others were silent for a while. After a while, Luffy, who lowered his head, raised his head abruptly, and made a high-five gesture in front of his chest. Snorted and said, "Uncle, you have been playing with us for so long, and you have also invited us to eat. Let us help you get there back. Don't meddle in other people's affairs." Nami slashed Luffy's head with a knife like a demon. However, Luffy did not move at all. Zoro also snorted and put his hand on the hilt of the sword. Sanji also lit a cigarette, exhaled a puff of smoke, and said, "There is a very important place for you, and those Miss May, then leave it to us." For a time, the crowd was surging. In Rogue Town, when all the powerful fighting forces had difficulty breathing. Today, they have already embarked on a great route, and they have also defeated a king under the 7 martial seas. They have already gained considerable confidence in their respective strengths. In other words, swell. Alas. The member of the Beret team nodded. The enemy there is someone who even the priest can't deal with, we have already reported to Wang Guo. However, before he could finish speaking, he saw Luffy and the others rushing directly to the shore. He jumped directly onto the 2 Waiba on the shore, and after launching, charged directly towards Appayado. Seeing this scene, the members of the Beret team were immediately surprised, and it was too late to stop them. Let him drive the Waiba to chase and violate the rules, and he couldn't help but panic. "Those guys. This is trouble." His expression changed continuously, but he finally reacted. Immediately turned his head and ran to the island, looking for the captain and the priests to report urgently. Holy place. Appayado. At the very center, here is a shrine. Usually only many priests, Gonfure and others are qualified to come here to perform sacrifices, but now they are occupied by a group of people. In the courtyard outside the temple, Analu stood there, tilted his head and scratched his ears, and said, in other words, this place was also occupied by that 10,000 nations. According to the circumstances of the questioning, this is the case. A Sky Islander who was following any road next to him bowed his head and responded. Analu snorted and stepped on the ground, the soil surging around him instantly. He reached out and grabbed a handful of soil and said, "The earth is something that only gods can control. I will take care of this place. Take it first, then start from this place. Let those guys know who is the real god." Chapter 339. Anil rode with confidence exploding. The attendant looked at Enilu's grasp of the earth, and couldn't help showing a look of awe. He followed Enilu because Enilu has the ability to change mud at will. This ability is equivalent to being able to change gold diamonds at will in the Qinghai Sea. "What are you going to do next?" he bowed and asked Enilu. Enilu tilted his head and said, "Let's solve the Angel Island over there first. God exists in the world, but they don't know how to respect it. This is a sin." But just when Enilu was about to go out and take down Angel Island first, a guard under his command suddenly ran in all the way. "Lord Enilu." "Yes." A group of Qinghai people came to the island. Hearing what his subordinates said, Enilu frowned and said, "Didn't you guys from Qinghai arrest them?" "Then, those guys are very strong. We can't deal with them." The guard member was in a cold sweat and knelt down at Enilu, his voice trembling. Enilu said displeased, "It's so useless. Forget it. If you dare to step into this holy land without God's permission, let me personally punish them." Sanctuary of Appayado. In a forest, there is a mess here. Obviously it has just experienced a battle. This is a forbidden place that belongs to God. An air islander was lying on the ground, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth, looking at Luffy and the others with difficulty, and roaring in a stern voice, You dare to break into this place. God, Lord Enilu is I will never let you go. Is it El Nilu?" Luffy stood there, looking condescendingly, clenching his fists coldly and saying, "I'm just going to find him, and then beat him up. Occupied other people's holy places, and return to me." Sanji took a breath, exhaled the smoke, and said coldly, "You let those beautiful young ladies in the sky are very unhappy. Idiot nosebleed man." Zoro said a word disdainfully, put one hand on the hilt of the sword, and said, "I don't know if that Enilu can use swordsmanship. But I want to find him to have a good fight." Sky Islander. What kind of mess is this? Are all the Qinghai people in front of him crazy? After being speechless, he didn't take a breath, tilted his head, and passed out. Really? Nami stood at the back of the team, came over at this moment, rubbed her brows and said, "You three are too energetic. What if that Enilu is very powerful?" Sanji threw away the cigarette butt and said, "Miss Nami, don't worry, we even killed Kibukai before. If you are really afraid, I will protect you, hehehehe." Bang! Nami knocks Sanji over with one punch. "You make me feel more dangerous." Just as the group was tidying up and ready to move on, Zoro's expression changed suddenly, and suddenly said, "Have you felt anything?" "Ah." Nami looked at Zoro strangely. At this moment, Sanji's expression changed, and he looked down at the ground below and said, "Something's wrong, the ground is moving." As Sanji's voice fell, the shaking of the ground became stronger and stronger, and finally Usopp, Nami and the others all felt it. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds 3. As time goes by, the whole earth seems to be completely shaken by an earthquake. It was still surging wildly and violently, as if it had turned into an ocean wave. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 340. Straw Hats Fight Nilu. Hold on to the trunk. Sanji let out a loud roar, and everyone immediately run to the next tree and hug the trunk. Boom, boom, boom. After a few more seconds, the soil in the field exploded and rose into the sky. Like a fountain, it surged toward the sky. I saw the entire ground cracked inch by inch, and the surrounding trees fell one after another. A section of soil was continuously raised, and finally turned into something like a raised rock, and spread all the way to the end of the line of sight. Finally, the earthquake stopped. Zoro and the others raised their heads one after another, looking at the uplifted rock above. I saw a figure walking slowly from a distance. The raised rock seemed to be welcoming him, and he went all the way to the highest place. It's just, how many of you are making a fool of yourself in my holy place? Anilu looked down at Luffy and the others, speaking slowly. Face became very solemn, staring at Anilu, and said solemnly, "Who are you?" Anilu smiled, showing a high-spirited expression, and said, "I am God." God. Sanji smiled coldly and said, "How can there be a god who robs other people's holy places?" Anilu narrowed his eyes, a dangerous light flashed in his eyes, and said, "What do you know? The earth is something that only I can control, and so is the Sky Island. Not only all the empty islands should be dedicated to me, but also the 8 gods." He used to be a member of Pika, and Junko was conquered by Yagami Kangdu, and all the empty islands became Yagami Kangta's territory. And when Bika was in prison, he was imprisoned all the time. Later, I found an opportunity to sneak out, and after being alive until a while ago, I finally got the power that belongs to God, the power to truly control the earth. Not only to occupy this holy land. He also wants to take back all the empty islands from Yagami Kangdu. What is Yagami? Zoro carried the word Hidao and asked Anilu. He seemed to have heard this name somewhere. Anilu glanced down at Sauron and said, "So you don't know that all the empty islands are under the rule of that Qinghai native?" But he is only a Qinghai native. Everything should be under the rule of God. Bang! Luffy smashed a stone next to him with a fist, looked up at Anilu, and said with a cold and determined look, "A gamey or something has nothing to do with me, I only know to knock you flying." The moment the voice fell, Luffy jumped up. His arms stretched out suddenly, and he punched Anilu fiercely. Anilu just looked at him like that. There was no intention of evading. Bang! Luffy's fist fell and hit Anilu's chest, instantly smashing a big hole in Anilu's chest, but there was no blood. That hole was dirt that could be seen everywhere. These soils surged rapidly, and soon filled that hole again. See this scene. The expressions of Sanji and the others suddenly changed. How could this be? Usopp couldn't help but asked in horror. At this moment, Zoro frowned, pulled out 2 knives, and slammed it towards Anilu above, and gave a cold drink. 2 swordsmanship, climb the building. Sigh, 2 sword beams flashed. 2 cracks appeared on the high platform composed of uplifted soil in an instant. The crack spread all the way up, passed through Anilu's body, and split Anilu into 3 sections.